Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, we review books. I am not going to have a long, rambling beginning of this video. I'm going to jump right in. This video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be a review of the Odyssey. Homer, my boy. This is one of my favorite pieces of literature, and I wanted it to have a spot on my channel. I have read the Odyssey, I want to say 3 times, and it's a book, or it's a story that I will read for the rest of my life because it's just one of my favorite pieces of fiction. And it is also Greek mythology. So let's jump right in. So again, the last time I read this book was in 2021, and I reviewed it on Instagram, and it has a halfway review and a final review. So I did a review up until like my thoughts. They're not gonna be my initial thoughts because again, I had read this, but this was my third read of it. But what I decided to discuss in the first half of my review, and then how I kind of tied all the strings together. Let's jump into this. We have a lot to talk about because these were not short. My thoughts were not short. So the Odyssey by Homer is, of course, one of those classics that I find that tends to intimidate people. That's just the ancient classics in general. They tend to be viewed as too academic, maybe pretentious, because there's all this in that analyzing and lectures about it. And so I think people tend to get intimidated and think that they're not smart enough to get something like the Odyssey. That is so far from the truth. The ancient Greeks wrote very simply, and yet it's lyrical prose, but it's not complicated. And depending on the translation, it reads very smoothly. And I don't think that this is a narrative that should be restricted to the classroom setting. I think that once people realize how approachable the Odyssey really is, they're going to be more eager to pick it up. Then they're going to be more eager to pick up the Iliad, more eager to pick up other ancient Greek texts, because again, the Greeks wrote so simply. Like the Greek plays like Antigone, they're so much fun, and they're not, again, like I said, they don't have to be limited to just a classroom setting. There's a lot to dive into, and you don't even have to have an in-depth understanding of ancient Greek society and mythology to enjoy the Odyssey. So let's go over the plot of the Odyssey. It is very simple. So this is several years after the Trojan War, which is the Iliad. So the Odyssey takes place several years after the Trojan War. Odysseus, my guy, Odysseus, is actually my favorite ancient Greek hero. Achilles is my other favorite. I know they're both they're both pieces of work, but they're my favorite. And Odysseus has not returned home yet to Ithaca, to his wife Penelope and his now grown son Telemachus. So on his journey home, Telemachus, no, I'm kidding, I call him Telemachus. Telemachus kind of goes hard though, doesn't it? On his journey home, he is held hostage by Calypso. His wife and son presume him to be dead, and though they are still holding on to this sliver of hope that Odysseus will return. So yeah, they're still holding on to this hope that Odysseus is going to return home. Penelope, because she's a dime piece, okay? She is plagued by dozens and dozens of suitors who hope to marry her because they think she's widowed. And Telemachus is actually determined to venture out and find out what really happened to his father. So one of the most well-known portions of this novel is the first half, in which you have Odysseus' travels to get back home and all of the gods and mythological creatures that he encounters on his way home. It's just iconic. If you haven't read the Odyssey, once you read the Odyssey and then you watch especially other types of Western literature, you see how much people are pulling from the Odyssey. I won't go much into the plot here, but I will cover some interesting themes and characteristics that I noticed in the Odyssey, and hopefully, again, this will inspire people to pick up the Odyssey if they felt intimidated by it. One of the most blatant characteristics in the Odyssey, and just in Greek mythology in general, it happens in the Iliad and other Greek myths, is this coexistence of the natural and the divine. So this is a world in which the gods are actively involved in the lives of humans, and they're even physical in front of you. Like they are they are presenting themselves to human beings, whether that be through shapeshifting or, whether, they're appearing as an animal or another human being, or just blatantly that God has appeared to you. And it creates these really fascinating dynamics. So right at the beginning of the Odyssey, the gods are assembled discussing some very juicy drama that happened with Agamemnon, for one, and, somebody else's wife. Okay, the drama. It is a soap opera. Okay. Also, low key, the name Agamemnon goes hard. What an OG name. I'm personally not going to fight a dude named Agamemnon because he just sounds like off with your head. One of my favorite names is Agamemnon. Anyway, so there is some drama with Agamemnon and his wife, and the guys are discussing this stuff, and it just goes to show, in Greek mythology in particular, how much the gods interfere with human life. Because the gods are actually, involved with a lot of these characters, these human characters as well. What a lamentable thing is that men should blame the gods and regard us as their source of trouble when it is their own transgressions which bring them suffering that is not their destiny. I find this interesting because as the narrative progresses, yes, we see scenarios in which men are causing their own drama, but we also see scenarios in which the gods interfere with human beings as they see fit. It makes the reader ask questions about free will when they're reading these types of Greek myths. What is free will in the context of these myths when you have so much interference from the divine? How much free will does a character really have when these gods can step in and do whatever they want at any time? So really, who's determining or what's determining these characters' fates? There's so much divine intervention, and the gods have their favorites. So if you're favored by the gods, good for you. If you're not favored by the gods, I'm sorry. So Telemachus replied, bright-eyed Athena, there your own intelligence fails. A god will inspire you, for I think the gods have blessed both your birth and your progression of manhood. Telemachus, Athena loved her some Telemachus, so Telemachus. I'm calling them both because I like saying they're both gangster. I know one is wrong. My pronunciation is wrong. Telemachus is right. Telemachus is hood adjacent. But Athena, that was her dude. So she's gonna help her favorite little human being out, right? So the goddess Athena is a daughter of Zeus, and so she has taken a particular interest to Odysseus and his family. So she is going to favor Telemachus because she favors Odysseus, and she is definitely going to ensure that her boy, Odysseus, is going to return back to Ithaca. She's constantly altering the appearances of Telemachus and Odysseus and Penelope to suit the end goal of making them appear more beautiful. Okay, so it's also showing how beauty in these types of myths can be a gift from the divine gifts and interference by these wild gods. So in essence, one can try to do what one wishes, but when a god or goddess has taken an interest, you then do become you're at the will of the gods, and even sometimes that favor can be detrimental. These narratives are really funny, these types of Greek myths, because it really does feel like in some cases a soap opera when you have the gods playing with human beings as their playthings. This book, the Odyssey, is tea time, okay? It's piping hot tea. So this concept of divine intervention and favor leads nicely into another major theme, not just in the Odyssey, but in Greek literature, in Greek myth in particular, hospitality. Since the gods have the ability to favor human beings and make themselves appear to humans as other people, one can never know if a stranger is really a god or goddess in disguise. So, in how you treat this person in disguise, who you may think is just a normal human being, can turn your favor with the gods or not. To any man with the slightest common sense, a guest and suppliant is as close as a brother. Because again, you may not know if you're entertaining a god or a goddess. So in essence, be hospitable to all because you don't know who you're dealing with. From this we get a society in which the stranger is treated with the utmost respect and honor. They are showered with good food, good wine, a place to sleep, and priceless gifts. If need, in some cases, yes, priceless gifts. When a stranger is treated poorly, it is frowned upon because it's considered a personal affront to Zeus. Zeus was also the god of supplicants, and so it makes sense why there would be a culture in which hospitality is very important. And a society will often embody the traits of its religion and or deity or deities. While reading the Odyssey, the reader can get an understanding, especially maybe a newbie to the Odyssey or a newbie to Greek myth. You'll get a sense of how the ancient Greeks made sense of the world around them. Many things such as the wind, the sun, the ocean, etc. are personified. When Dawn is capitalized, had risen from the bed where she sleeps, finds illustrious Tithonus, my bad, I had an extra I in there. I made him a hood adjacent to bring daylight to immortals and to mortals. Now the south wind being capitalized, would toss it up to the north wind to play with, and the east wind would leave it for the west to chase. But also those descriptions are just beautiful. These descriptions not only practically describe the characteristics of the world in nature in a clever way, they do make sense. And it shows how the ancient Greeks deeply observed the world around them. These descriptions in the Odyssey definitely make the narrative, I think, feel more ethereal. And yes, this is a mythology. So there's just something special about the way that Homer personifies nature. Again, it's not descriptive language. The ancient Greeks are very concise, but it is poignant in its own way. This is one reason why I think the Odyssey is so great, is because you come across so many different characters, so many myths within a myth, stories within a story, especially as Odysseus in the first half is coming across so many mythological creatures and gods and goddesses like Circe and Cyclops, Scylla and Charybdis. These are even portrayed sometimes in childhood cartoons and children's stories. And so when you read the source, you're like, oh, this is where this is coming from. And so whenever I read the Odyssey, there's also a bit of nostalgia in it because I, kind of grew up with pieces of the Odyssey put into mainstream cartoons. Let's go to my second half where I kind of finalized things. All right. In the first half of the Odyssey, it's not just Odysseus on his way back home. You also see what Telemachus and Penelope are dealing with, especially with all these suitors and what they're dealing with in his absence. So the second portion of the Odyssey covers Odysseus' return to Ithaca. When he returns, Athena disguises him as an old beggar. And again, we see the important role that the concept of hospitality plays in this narrative. Odysseus is taken in and treated well by Eumaeus, who is his swineherd. Of course, Eumaeus does not know that he's speaking with his master, his employer, but he treats Odysseus with so much kindness. Stranger, it is not right for me to turn away any stranger, even one in a worse state than you are, for strangers and beggars all come in Zeus's name, in a gift from folk like us, and none the less welcome for being small. Again, we continue to see, especially, I'm sorry, I'm scratching my eye. There might be something in my contact lens. This culture of serving strangers permeates the second part of this book because Odysseus remains disguised for the majority of it. And so because Odysseus has returned home, there's some dramatic irony here. Clothed as a beggar, he interacts with the suitors in his own home who are trying to marry his homegirl Penelope. That's his wife, okay? And apparently, apparently Penelope was a dime piece, so, okay. The suitors treat Odysseus disdainfully to their detriment. So again, you get to see what happens when you do not show the proper respect to a stranger. You did wrong to strike the wretched vagrant. You're doomed if he turns out to be some god from heaven, and the gods do disguise themselves as strangers from abroad, and move from town to town in every shape, observing deeds of the just and unjust. Like I said, this does create a lot of excellent dramatic irony in this narrative in the second half, because you're thinking, ooh, I can't wait for Odysseus to reveal who he really is, because you know he's going to snap on these guys. My guy was in the Trojan War. I mean, he knows how to fight, right? His son, who doesn't know that the beggar is his father, treats the beggar, the stranger, with a high regard. And it's so much fun to see Telemachus and Odysseus work together and scheme to get rid of these suitors. So Telemachus is in awe of his father once he does discover who this beggar is. And there are a lot of funny moments between father and son here. Father, his noble son replied, you will come to know that in due course what I am made of, and I am certainly not stupid. So Odysseus was actually gone for 20 years. So father and son are getting reacquainted with each other, and they immediately establish a good rapport with one another, and they fall into this easy chemistry of cooperation and teamwork. There is also quite a bit of interaction between Penelope and Odysseus the beggar, and she is also very kind towards him. See a strong contrast, my eyes. Woo! You see a strong contrast between the moral character traits of Odysseus, Penelope, and Telemachus versus the rowdy suitors who just up in his house eating all his stuff, drinking all his wine and hitting on his wife. It's unacceptable. Man's life is short enough. The whole world prays that a heartless man who behaves heartlessly will suffer misfortune in his life and derides him after his death. Burping. Whereas when a man behaves kindly because his heart is kind, his reputation is spread far and wide by the guests he befriends, and he has no lack of people to sing his praises. So Odysseus does take care of these suitors when he reveals who he is in all his muscular glory, because of course he's an ancient Greek hero. And he is reunited with Penelope. You get some loose ends tied up, and the Odyssey concludes. There is some speculation, and I have notes in this particular edition. This is the Penguin Clothbound Classic edition. Whether or not the last book or the last chapter is written by Homer or it was written by somebody else and then added on. There are some slight stylistic changes in the writing, but overall I didn't find it jarring. Some scholars do argue that it's highly likely that Homer wrote this segment himself, as it follows the patterns of his other texts. I do think this makes more sense. Otherwise, the ending would seem too abrupt. But that's just me. I know there are scholars who can go into way more depth than me. The Odyssey is a very fun read, and I just wanted to kind of put those three out there. I didn't go into a lot of plot stuff. I never really do my reviews, but just enough to hopefully whet your appetite to read this book if you've ever been intimidated by the Odyssey, because it's ancient. It's an ancient text, and because there's just so much academic discussion around it, but really it's just a fun read. Once you get into the groove of the style and get acquainted with the characters, you're fly through the pages because it's the drama. It's the drama. And it's just one of those stories that whenever I pick it up, I'm kind of smiling through the whole book. It's just a fun time. It's clever. All the mythological creatures are fun. Again, there's a bit of nostalgia because this is a story that permeates Western culture in particular. And it's in pop culture. And it's always fun to interact with the original text. If you've been itching to get into ancient classical literature, I would start with the Odyssey. Forget everything else. Start with the Odyssey. I would actually recommend reading the Odyssey first and then reading the Iliad, because the Odyssey sucks you in. I think that there are times when the Iliad can drag a bit, but that may be a little bit of bias because I've read the Iliad twice. I read it in my ancient Greek civilization class in university, and I also had to read it again in university when I took Greek and Roman warfare. So the second time I read it, I had to read it and analyze from a military tactic perspective. Not fun, not fun. And so we were analyzing like the Greek army and how the Greek fought and Trojans versus I'm like, oh my goodness. Fun class, but when you're analyzing it from that perspective, it's not the juiciest piece of literature. So anyway, I do need to reread the Iliad, and I need to read it for fun this time. I haven't read it since college. All right, yeah. So the Odyssey is a favorite. It's been a favorite since childhood. I didn't read it in childhood, but I had seen like movie adaptations of it, and it has been a favorite story of mine since childhood. Before I could even properly read, and of course, it is a 5 out of 5 for me. I will always have it on my shelves. I will always read it throughout my life. So here it is, The Odyssey. I wanted to keep this review less academic and just more focused on the fun of it, but still highlight some of the themes that I think that if you're a new reader, can help you understand certain elements of the story and the plot and why things kind of take shape the way that they do according to the ancient Greeks. That is all. Please feel free to like, subscribe, leave me a comment. And also, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. I post everything there first, but I also mainly reserve my Instagram stories for goofy reels and goofy memes, because that is how I like to spend my time on the internet, laughing. All right, and with that, I will sign out. I will see you in the next one. Bye.